And so we have two of the exhibitors from the Art Dubai Digital space, and we also have Paul Harwood from Nansen. So I'm going to start by introducing each of our guests, and then we'll get to know more about what they do. So Paul Harwood is the product manager for NFTs at Nansen.ai, an associate lecturer at Falmouth University and visiting lecturer for the Royal College of Arts. He's currently in the later stages of a PhD where he actively researches value created by networks and communities brought together by Web3. And huge thanks to Nansen for supporting the Global Art Forum. Thank you very much. Sam Spike, to my right, is from Fingerprints DAO, and they're a digital collective that supports an ecosystem of Web3 cultural organizations. And also to my right is India Price from Gazelio. And Gazelio is the digital art arm of Gazeli Art House, comprising of physical space in the lower ground floor of 39 Dover Street, Gazelio project space, and a dynamic online exhibition program, including Gazelio residency, NFT initiatives, and collaborations, and a permanently installed VR library. Will you please join me in welcoming Paul, Sam, and India? So I've asked my guests to just prepare and present a short overview of who they are, what they represent, how they got to where they are, and so we're going to go through one by one, and then I have a number of questions because that's what I get paid to do. And of course, open it up to you guys. So we're going to start with you, Paul.
Sure.
So if we could have Paul's presentation, that would be great.
Right, so thank you for the introduction. I'm Paul, and I work at Nansen.ai, which is a blockchain analytics company. We try to make meaning out of blockchain data, so we service the signal. I'm also a researcher interested in social capital and crypto, and looking at new business models, and particularly the role of trust in business model innovation. I like to try and combine those two worlds together as an active researcher. So for me, I like to take some academic theories and try to live them. And places like this, where you see crypto colliding with art, colliding with Dubai, it's just fascinating to be part of. I also buy lots of NFTs, almost in an addictive way. And I particularly like the work of Fuocious, so I wanted to use Fuocious as a way of demonstrating just what I think framing the picture of what's happening in NFTs actually means. I connect personally with Fuocious's work, but they're also the youngest ever, as you may know, youngest ever solo exhibitionist at Christie's. So the youngest ever solo exhibitionist at Christie's came from crypto, came from NFTs. They're a teenager, and they'd already made it by the time Christie's were showing their work. And for me, that really just highlights what's going on, the power and how we're empowering artists and creating a new world where that value can flow from the inside out of a community. To kind of frame that, that's where my research comes in. So I look at exactly what the blockchain means. Why is that different to anything else we've seen before? And to me, that comes down to the fundamental layer of the blockchain, where we're dealing with an open yet secure database. So open in the sense that anyone in the world can participate or be an authority, and secure in the sense that you have an identity which is yours entirely. You are responsible for it. You choose how to reveal yourself to the world as you please. And I think that's fundamentally makes it social and cultural technology. So I really like to analyze this from a theoretical perspective, but also look at real examples I'm interested in, like Fuocious, where you can kind of say, well, if it was just Christie's as a third-party agency, would they have ever connected with the community around them? And would they have ever brought value to their work in their lifetime? So for me, that's how I frame it, and that's what I wanted to research. So my thesis is looking at social capital in blockchain, these theories that have been been around in the world a long time about how social relations build value. And my thesis says that basically the internet we have right now just isn't any good. It's damaging the world. And it's drawing us away from this culture on social value that blockchain enables by being open and by having that identity layer. And that's where I got really interested in Nansen. So I found Nansen early on when they were building ETL tools. So they were transforming the blockchain into meaningful data in an open source way, so anyone can see the data on the blockchain and make sense, because there's very few people in the world that can actually trust what's going on. And that's the fundamental value proposition, is that we can build a history of shared exchanges between us in a peer-to-peer way without a third party. So I got really interested in Nansen because they have this open source technology. They've got the data sets where I can prove my thesis that social capital exists in blockchain. And I do that by looking at blockchain data, not by doing surveys in person, because the whole idea is that this is personal data in the first place. And as I got drawn into Nansen, I really connected with their value proposition, and the researcher in me started heading up NFTs there, and we started servicing the signal of what's going on in blockchain data. So what that means is we take this massive data set, this data set no one's ever seen before, that all academics should be interested in, and we research every single wallet in it, because you can see inside everyone's wallet. You don't know who they are, but you can see their behavior. So we don't judge people from where they come from, but what they do. And Nansen puts that into labels. So we might find out people buying NFTs really early on. We might find out people who have similar NFTs in their collection and are buying a different collection. And we service that signal mainly to investors, but also we try to support the whole space in doing this and building the future of finance. So the idea is the more we can reward the early artists and the early investors, the more they will put the profits back into the space and grow it. So for me, it's a really fascinating new world, but it's also framing the picture for me is about looking at how this has always happened. And actually, it was quite strange when the internet came along that we stopped having these social relationships, and we depend on Amazon or Visa or Facebook to look after our wallets and mitigate or be an intermediary or an agency for us. And one of the most interesting bits that really, when I was thinking about it this morning, that really stood out is that both my research looks at blockchain as the medium as well as the picture. And Nansen does a very similar thing because we're so close to the data, we see what people are doing on chain. So we might see that our smart money label of people that make smart decisions are moving into NFTs. So we directly see that that's where the market's going, and we can connect with those people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll circle back, Paul, but just in case we have members of the audience who are not as familiar with the terminology.
Yeah, sure.
And since, given that we have the pleasure of somebody like yourself who's so well versed, I mean, for anybody that hasn't heard of what the blockchain is, how do you explain that?
So that's the phrase. It's an open, secure database. So it's a public database that anyone can access. There's no one authority that can control it. So yeah, open and secure. And I think, in contrast, you could say any other database we use day to day is secured by a third-party agency.
And then could you say something about, leading on from that then, the ideological tussle between centralized and decentralized?
Yeah, so I think for me the decentralized word is entirely ambiguous when we use it. But in this sense, I see it as a structural decentralization, whereas we actually often still with centralized communities, just like social circles are often centralized, or they have several central areas. So it's a bit like a market, town square market, where it's very central, but the structure of it is entirely decentralized, which people and goods from all over the world can transact.
And indeed, I mean, within the space, there's a great deal of vituperation regarding just how decentralization is, right? to the extent where purists would say only Bitcoin is really decentralized, and then everything after that is on a kind of sliding scale, all the way up to like VC-funded, basically, sort of VC-funded companies, with CEOs and all the traditional obligations that a company might have. I mean, could you say something about that as well?
Well, I think that's a similar idea to that marketplace, if I bring it back to that, in that it's just a more level marketplace where the rules are made from the inside out. So everyone can have a seat at the table or find their own table. So I don't think it's so much us and them. I think it's more, the more diversity you get of different approaches, the better. And even the Bitcoin maximalists or the early crypto guys, actually, they all came from completely different. They were one of the first communities where truly they didn't come from one place. So you had cryptographers, you had people interested in Tor networks, you had people interested in advanced cryptography and science, and they all came together under this anonymous kind of email list. So I think that really kind of goes back to the very core of it, which is it's all even been manifested in a decentral way, so everyone can kind of have their own perspective on that, maybe operate in the same way like VCs would, or in totally new ways. The DAO is probably the structure for me that makes the most sense there, in the sense that we talk about DAOs a lot, but really they've existed forever. Like, they're just small, trusted communities based on a history of shared interactions.
Again, just for anybody who hasn't heard
sorry,
what a DAO is, could you maybe just quickly?
A DAO seems to be used rather than as a specific terminology, just to talk about a crypto community, so a community focused around crypto and founded in it. I think anything else tends to be a bit vague. I know that's vague.
But as an acronym, decentralized autonomous organization.
That's right, yeah.
Right, yeah. Thank you. We'll come back to a lot of this. Sam, over to you.
Sure thing. Did I get the presentation?
Yeah, can we have Sam's PowerPoint, please?
Is there some way of controlling it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, could you pass the clicker?
Oh, yeah, sure. There you are.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Spike, and I'm the creative director of Fingerprints DAO. My role means that I'm heavily involved in the curatorial side of the DAO and its various artistic initiatives, including the booth that we're presenting currently at Art Dubai Digital. For those who don't know but have just heard, DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. A DAO is essentially a crypto-native organizational framework that can take several forms. It can refer to an organization whose operations are governed entirely by code stored on a blockchain, an organization that runs autonomously or programmatically. It can also refer to a group of people on the internet with shared interests, principally shared financial interests, who practice various forms of governance to manage those interests collectively. The latter formulation of a DAO has been succinctly described as a group chat with a shared bank account. Fingerprints formed about a year ago as an online community that gathered around a collection of 26 autoglyphs. This is an image of an autoglyph up here. Autoglyphs were the second project by Lava Labs after their famous 2017 project of pixel art portraiture CryptoPunks. Autoglyphs are considered very historically significant because they're widely perceived to be the first on-chain generative artwork on the Ethereum blockchain. And on-chain refers to art that can be recreated entirely from information that is stored on the blockchain. The actual artwork of autoglyphs was inspired by 1960s ASCII art, the work of algorists and creative coders such as Vera Molnar, and the rules-based practices of conceptual artists such as Solar Wit. In April 2021, Fingerprints launched the Prints token as a governance token for the DAO. You need to own a certain number of Prints tokens to be a member of the group, essentially. The tokens are used to vote on decisions regarding the management of the DAO's collection, its treasury, and the various projects that it undertakes. Having started with this collection of autoglyphs, we then had to decide what else we wanted to collect. Instead of collecting just purely on-chain art, which was an obvious avenue for us to take, we decided instead to widen our focus onto the field of, it's still a small field, but the field of work that uses blockchain as an artistic medium rather than purely as a medium of exchange or commerce. Art that is in some way self-critical, art that uses the material affordances of blockchain to reflect on and to challenge the way that the technology is collectively experienced and understood. Organizationally, within the group, we decided on an open structure with an elected curation committee. So we have open working groups any members can be part of that are dedicated to various areas: marketing, branding, design, finance, projects. And then the members elected a closed private curation committee that has a mandate to collect works on behalf of the DAO. But despite having a private committee, we still have to make curatorial decisions collectively within that committee. So we needed some kind of common, agreed-upon framework on which to base those decisions. The genre or medium of blockchain or smart contract art didn't feel specific enough to really guide that. So we expanded the term into 4 categories. The first of those is on-chain storage. Can the artwork be recreated from information that's stored on the blockchain in part or whole? Second is dynamism. Is the artwork responsive in some way to on-chain activity? Does it in some way change state in accordance with on-chain activity? The third of those is coordination-based. Does the artwork incentivize some kind of coordinated participation by human or even non-human agents? And the fourth is financialization. Does the artwork critically engage with questions of financial value or ownership, or does it itself deploy complex economic mechanisms as part of its form or process? And just for clarity, the works that we collect don't have to do all 4 of these things, but they have to do at least one of these things in an interesting way. So over the past year, using this framework to guide us, Fingerprints has collected a large number of artworks. But unlike many NFT collection DAOs, we focused exclusively on the work of 9 artists or artist groups. As you can see above, some of these artists use their legal or public identities, others go by pseudonyms. Some of these artists have established reputations in the traditional or digital art world. Other artists really rose to prominence or even started making work properly, seriously as artists during the NFT boom of the past 12 months. And I would invite the audience to look up the work of these artists. It's very good. So as well as collecting art, the DAO has, in the last 6 months, expanded its activities and started working with artists to develop new projects that employ the blockchain as a medium. An example of one such project was a new iteration of Every Icon by John F. Simon Jr. that we co-produced last year. For those who don't know it, Every Icon is a very important seminal work of software art that was published on the web in 1997. It was developed by John Simon between 96 and 97. It consists of a 32 by 32 square grid where each square can be colored either black or white. The software runs through every possible combination of colored squares until the entire field is black, discovering myriad images or new icons on its way. It takes 3 months to complete the first line of permutations. It takes several 100 million years to complete the second line of permutations. So essentially, seen one way, Every Icon is a visual timekeeping system made of blocks that's potentially never-ending, if that sounds familiar. And we partnered with a new Web3 laboratory based in New York called EAT Works, named after the famous Experiments in Art and Technology program of the late 1960s, to work with John F. Simon Jr. to adapt Every Icon to the blockchain in the form of an editioned NFT series that was stored entirely on-chain. We've also recently explored incubating new DAOs dedicated to different areas of culture in Web3. Most notably in November last year, we incubated Raw DAO, which has since grown to be the leading photography DAO in the NFT space with over 500 members. Raw DAO is a photography collection DAO. Just like the artists collected by Fingerprints, some of the photographers that Raw collects have existing reputations in the traditional photography world, while others have principally enjoyed success or exposure since the advent of NFTs. Also, like Fingerprints, Raw DAO is structured as a number of open working groups with an elected curation committee. However, since photography is a much larger field of cultural practice than blockchain or smart contract art, with so many different types of work that we can collect, it's allowed Raw to experiment with different forms of decentralized curation that draw upon the knowledge of the full membership of the DAO to inform acquisitions. And I just wanted to end by touching briefly on the work that Fingerprints is exhibiting this year at Art Dubai, because I think it adds a new perspective to the kind of things that we can do and may do in the future. So when we were invited to participate at Art Dubai Digital, we felt that we had two options available to us. Either we could display our collection on a bunch of screens in a conventional way, or we could commission an artist or invite an artist or group of artists to develop a new site-specific installation for our booth. We were particularly keen to use the opportunity of existing at a real-life art fair to do something that really married the physical environment with blockchain technology. So we approached TerraZero, a group of German artists based in Berlin who've been working with blockchain as part of their artistic practice since 2015. TerraZero's work is largely concerned with using blockchain to bestow forms of financial sovereignty and semi-self-sufficiency upon ecological systems. And the work that they created for Art Dubai, which is planned to take place over 4 exhibitions, this is the first of them, is titled Seed Capital. Seed Capital, as you can see in this diagram here, consists principally of a plant, a generic plant, the type of which you might see in a hotel lobby and walk past, positioned on a sculpture that acts as public seating. The plant is connected to 2 sensors, one measuring the temperature in the air, the other the moisture in the soil. Every 15 minutes, the sensors feed that data to a microcomputer that's positioned beneath the plant on the sculpture. Every 15 minutes, if the values of the sensors are within a range that is beneficial to the health of the plant, then that microcomputer generates a visual representation of the data in the form of a certificate that can be purchased online as an NFT by anybody with an internet connection, one every 15 minutes. But the crucial twist is that if the values drawn from the sensors are out of range, if they're too low or too high, if it's too hot or too dry in the booth, the microcomputer doesn't do this. It doesn't generate the representation. There's no NFT to be minted. And so what the artwork does conceptually is it stages a scenario within which the exhibiting gallery or the exhibiting institution has a very direct economic incentive to ensure the best possible conditions for the survival of the plant. Thank you.
Sam, just a couple of things. One, again, let's be kind of brutally pragmatic. What is minting an NFT? For anybody that doesn't know.
What is minting an NFT?
Yeah.
Minting an NFT is basically paying to generate a sort of cryptographic record on the blockchain, which is associated with, commonly associated with something, with an artwork, for example. That record or that token ID, can be associated with a function that can be used to transfer it between one address and another, so it can be traded or exchanged.
And then the other thing just wanted to ask a biographical question, because it's interesting in terms of how you got to where you are now. This is not what you were planning to do up till relatively recently. Could you tell us where you were planning to go and how you've made this deviation?
Yeah, of course. So I've only been doing this for about 14 months. Prior to that, in 2020, I was working with a museum in the UK, the Fitzwilliam Museum, which is the art museum of the University of Cambridge. And I was working on an exhibition with a film historian there about props in painting and sculpture. And I was putting together and applying to go back to university to do my doctorate, which was meant to be about trompe-l'oeil in contemporary art. And in January 2021, I somehow accidentally sort of fell down the rabbit hole, and
But how accidental is accidental?
Accidental was quite accidental. I was curious. I had a bit of time on my hands. I wanted to learn more about it, so I found an artist whose work I felt was conceptually appropriate to the form. It was actually photographic work that in some way generated like a visual hash of a time, an event that took place over time. And I thought that that was conceptually interesting in the sense that in cryptography, when you generate a hash, you generate sort of a unique identifier for information. And so I started helping this artist connect with collectors, produce work, sell the work. And as I was doing that, and as I was getting in touch with people, I ended up meeting the founders of Fingerprints, and I ended up meeting a number of other people with whom I've also co-founded an NFT exhibitions platform called JPEG.
Thank you very much. India, please, over to you.
Of course, sir.
Could you pass the clicker?
Of course I can.
Hello? Okay. Hi, excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little bit from being at the booth. But yeah, so I'm going to dive into Gazelle.io. We're a little bit more rooted in digital art and less kind of blockchain technologies as a digital art gallery. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so Gazelle.io is the digital art branch of Gazelle Art House. Gazelle Art House is a contemporary art gallery based in London, but we've been kind of navigating displaying digital art since about 2016. In 2016, we started hosting an exhibition called Enter Through the Headset, which is an exclusively virtual reality exhibition, so no real kind of, physical artworks on the wall, maybe some screens, but all headsets in the gallery space. And with that, we became more interested in digital art more in a general sense, so we launched a kind of online residency program, so not committing to a full-on kind of digital program yet, but using an online residency program to reach out to digital artists and learn more. So that was kind of a monthly ongoing program. And we also, in 2020, we opened the Gazelle.io project space. So we then renovated the lower ground floor of the gallery. And it's essentially kind of a white room where we give one artist, or perhaps a collection of artists, autonomy to kind of create an immersive exhibition, potentially produce physical artworks and display kind of digital artworks. And with that, we sell NFTs, and that started in January 2021, around the same time as you joined Fingerprints DAO. And that's kind of what I have been exploring within the gallery. So this is a picture of Enter Through the Headset. Now, initially, as we are a commercial art gallery, we would try and sell these works, but in the same way we would sell the traditional artworks, so we didn't mint our NFTs until much later on. And that was kind of a difficult situation in terms of private collectors. Our traditional collectors weren't so understanding of kind of collecting a file. So we mainly had kind of institutional interest with these exhibitions. And you can see here a kind of example of how the gallery was looking. It's quite a spectacle. And then when we renovated the project space, this is kind of how we've invited an artist to completely kind of take over the space. You can see the green walls. The wallpaper is actually augmented reality, and we had a simultaneous metaverse show as well. And you can see here the augmented reality pieces. So just an example. And Claudia Hart, she's kind of dropped NFTs on several various platforms. Now, this is our first NFT exhibition, so it made sense for us as a gallery to use our physical space, and we invited digital artists, both kind of native within the NFT community and also digital artists who we had worked with who hadn't minted NFTs before. So this is Brendan Dawes. He is kind of native in the crypto community. We reached out to him and dropped some NFTs on known origin. And we asked them to kind of create a physical element as well with the digital to kind of try and create this fusion of physical and digital art, trying to kind of represent what the gallery does in terms of a gallery that works kind of with historical contemporary art as well as kind of digital art. So we really wanted to create this kind of fusion. So the NFTs were actually sold with the unlockable content feature of having a physical sculpture. So that's kind of was embedded within the certificate of authenticity, which is also registered on the blockchain through our sister company, Basar. This is another exhibition that we did by an artist named Jake Elwis. As you can see, we really cater towards the way the artist wants the kind of display to be. So he specifically wanted these types of screens, and we sold the screens with the kind of digital file. But this is how it was supposed to be exhibited. Whereas occasionally, for example, with our booth in Art Dubai, we invite the collector to kind of choose however they would want the NFT to be displayed. But this is how the artist wanted the kind of interface to be. And with each exhibition, we also host events. So with Gazelio, we are kind of branded as we try and really recruit kind of young emerging artists. The artist did a kind of drag performance that was AI generated with also a kind of educational presentation. And this is kind of our way of trying to bring our traditional kind of gallery community to understand kind of the digital artworks that we have on display downstairs. And now, because the space is quite small, we also have explored metaverse opportunities. So we facilitated a group show in partnership with Spatial, which is a virtual reality kind of metaverse kind of platform where you can directly import your NFTs that are listed in your wallet onto a gallery space. And we'd create a group exhibition, and we organized a kind of tour with the OpenSea on Twitter Spaces, where we kind of virtually went through each and every work. And that was really fun to play with this kind of museum-sized exhibition space online. So here you can see kind of some of the variety of artworks. And in the meantime, the gallery itself has been exploring kind of the history of digital art, specifically with artificial intelligence. So really trying to delve into how we got where we are now. So this was an exhibition that is branded with Gazelle Art House, exhibiting Manfred Moore, Lynn Hirschman Leeson, Harold Cohen, Mario Klingerman, etc. And this was all kind of physical artworks, but produced through artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we've also will simultaneously host various talks with this as well. So yeah, that's everything. And then going forward, we are looking to kind of delve even more into the decentralized decentralized environment. Potentially, looking at Dawes and, creating a kind of permanent metaverse exhibition space, and really honing in on our virtual reality library, which is permanently in the gallery, and trying to look into kind of minting those works, especially. So yeah.
Thank you, indeed.
No worries.
So the first thing I want to ask you about is something I think a lot about, which is earliness, or being early. And I'm reminded of this very mythical figure in the kind of crypto lore, which is a guy who bought a pizza with a Bitcoin at least 10, 12 years ago. I can't remember, maybe around 2011. And that Bitcoin, sorry, that pizza today, today's price would be about $39,000. And back in November, it would have been worth about $65,000 as we topped out. And so I think there's great purchase and great value given to the notion of earliness in crypto. But I think that poor sucker is a really good example of how sometimes you could be too early. But I just want to ask you how you feel in relation to that notion of how early we are. I mean, both in, let's say, blockchain and crypto space or Web3 generally, which does predate NFTs, technically, right? But then it seems to me that, I mean, also NFT, like non-art NFTs, predate art NFTs, right? So they're even more recent, right? So yeah, Paul, how early are we still?
Yeah, it's a stereotype, but I think we're really early, but obviously you can't predict the future. One of the indicators to me is just the amount of people connecting with here. Everyone seems to be sharing the same words and the same momentum of where it's going. And every time we have a boom and bust cycle, we seem to think, this is it, everything's exhausted, who would be interested? But from the data perspective, we see new buyers every day, and we see returning buyers every day. So the market value might go up and down, but something is going on that's really interesting, and more people are getting interested. I think, going back to the pizza, kind of like the counter side of that is that's the first guy to use Bitcoin to buy pizza. I mean, what a historical thing to be part of. And so to me, I'm a permabull, and I think it's early, and people kind of glimpse a bit of what might be happening with crypto and what's possible. And there's so many opportunities. It's hard sometimes to actually unite around some kind of common narrative. So,
but if we were to take like the timeline of the internet, which obviously goes, I mean, its absolute origins go back to the 60s and ARPANET or whatever. Forget that, but more in terms of the moment that the internet became entered into our public and mainstream populist lives, somewhere in the 90s, right? Where do you think we are in that timeline from like the birth, the beginning of the internet, or even, Tim Berners-Lee, the World Wide Web, 89, where are we on that, do you think, right now? Are we still in the 90s?
I wouldn't compare it to the internet. I would say cryptography is being developed for over 40 years easily. I mean, it was a munition that was illegal to export for a long time, just like Netscape Navigator. So for me, it's not such a simple comparison. It's more an idea of how big is the internet, or how big is digital going to be. And that, for me, that comes back to almost like a postmodern idea of compressing time and space in a much bigger picture. And we're just starting to see new levels of societal organization based on protocol. And I think that when I glimpse stuff like that, that's when it really looks early to me. But more from an investor point of view, I don't think we know what it will look like. And will we be talking about NFTs, or will we be talking about generative art, or what that actually looks like? I've no idea, but it does feel like there's a genuine momentum, and especially with my research, it connects so strongly with theories that have been around even longer. Sometimes you read Bordeaux or Marx, and you might just say, well, it feels like they're talking about crypto. Like, they talk about the rules of the game, and a lot of the language overlaps it. So, yeah, for me, it's big.
Thank you. And Sam and India, I mean, you're both relatively new, right? You said 14 months. You said January 2021. So we could say both your engagements, but also your organizations are early, hopefully in a much longer kind of lifespan. But how early does it feel to you right now? Because it's clearly more advanced than it was a year ago, is it not? So does that, I mean, is this Is this exponential growth, exponential engagement? How do you, I mean, I don't want to ask about the future because it's almost a kind of boring question, but how early does it feel to you? Both in terms of the kind of art that's produced, but also the kind of cultural reverberations around it.
Yeah, it feels early enough that we're still talking about it, right? If it was, sort of like fully normalized, we wouldn't be having these discussions. So I guess in that sense, it feels pretty early.
The moment we stop talking about it, that's when it's...
Potentially. I mean, it probably goes through a sort of cycle. At the beginning, nobody's talking about it. Then everybody's talking about it. And then there's no need to talk about it anymore. Yeah. But it's been very interesting. It's hard sometimes when you're online and you really are within a sort of echo chamber, talking to people who know about this, who understand the terminology, who speak the language, who have the slang, the jargon. You have no idea what other people really think about it, people who aren't participating in the space. But being here and speaking with people from around the world who come from either traditional art backgrounds or investment backgrounds, you really cannot place the people who have a wallet, the person who's going to come up and say, can I mint that? You think you can, but you really can't. And so that's quite fascinating. That suggests sort of that we're slightly further along, that it's harder to maybe stereotype people who are participating in these economies. But, Fingerprints and myself, we also are interested in earliness in the sense of looking back previous to 1 year ago, previous to 14 months ago, to artists who've been working for the last 7 years. Not that long, right? 7 years in the scale of art history and the scale of contemporary art is still a very short period of time with these technologies. And, some of those people who built through the bear market, as they say, are really those who have been engaging the most critically with the technology as well, I would say. And so we're trying to emphasize that while they may have been early, what they were doing has continuity with what is happening. And earliness is also used in the space, I would say, as a way to assign value to things. People want to get in early. But also, the challenge before us culturally, I think, is to develop systems and to develop frameworks that allow people to value artwork or other cultural artifacts based on more than the fact that they're old. Right? That's not a very sophisticated way, really, to... But
it's interesting how that's still now a metric. No?
It is. Well, maybe it's
CryptoPunks and like the original. No, this sort of resurgence. And if you look at the most valuable NFTs, it's essentially those that are assigned, as it were, the status of, I don't know, Duchamp's urinal or something like that. No,
right.
The ground zero of.
And just like Duchamp's urinal was not the first ready-made, normally the first NFT was not the first NFT.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Earliness. How early do you think we are?
I personally learn something new every day, and I think that's a very large indicator of how early we are. A lot of kind of what we've done as a gallery, coming from the kind of conventional kind of structure and business model, is we have to take risks and experiment, and that's simultaneously terrifying but also really exciting. So I think the earliness kind of brings the element of like, oh, will we have luck with this, or will this be a learning curve? But yeah, and I think also it's forced us to use external resources and reach out to technologists and coders and our artists as well, because of the technology behind their works using artificial intelligence and machine learning. They are very well versed with these kinds of challenges with the blockchain, and they kind of understand this language and the kind of jargon a little bit better than we did at first. So I think when we started, it felt like there was already so much to learn, and then I was kind of surprised by the indication that we're early. I was like, oh, this is just beginning. But yeah, it's really exciting, and I think it's such a great opportunity to work in a industry that is up and coming and developing and not static. You can make your rules. You can explore. You could find something amazing, and that's really great.
So just to extend that a bit in terms of audiences and collectors, okay? And I've been thinking about how, typically, I don't know, 5 or 6 million people would visit MoMA. Of that number, how many buy art? It's a tiny proportion, right? Like absolutely tiny. So there's a way in which art has existed as having cultural, social value without having to own it, right? Now, I'm wondering whether, does this technology, does the promise of this space also promise a kind of greater or a lessening of the chasm between audience and collector? Paul, I want to start with you because one of your articles that you sent me was called "When DeFi Meets NFTs," which is super interesting. And then you said that the more active a user is trading in DeFi, the more likely they are an NFT collector. Perhaps we could start with what we mean by DeFi, but then could you expand on that? Because I find that very interesting in terms of, is the space inventing, generating, again, new audiences and therefore new collectors that haven't existed before?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's appealing to a whole ecosystem of different collectors. And personally, I've become much more involved in art, all types of art. Paid more for music than I ever have. My Spotify subscription, there's nothing compared to Def Beef. And I think that's really important because it opens up the artists as well, so the audience. From our data, we can see that there's a very long tail end of buying. So you talk about the amount of people coming to buy a piece of art. We're seeing, even just on OpenSea, the amount of people just putting something up and calling it art, and the amount of people buying it is unbelievable. And it might be a microeconomy as well, but it also means a lot of artists in countries where that's a lot of money just to make a very small, what's considered a small amount a day, is enough to give them the independence to actually take that art to the next level. So I think there's a whole, for me, I mean, working for Nansen, one of the things I see is that there's this whole level of data where you can actually answer a lot of these questions based on some assumptions. So more in the traditional markets, we might not have that oversight of exactly how many people are buying something, but with the blockchain, we can see exactly when transactions happen and how much they cost. So, I think the audience and collector are so much more intimate in a blockchain context.
Sam, would you agree with that? What's your experience so far in terms of, and is there a greater confluence between audience and collector when it comes to this space than let's say the galleries that are on the other side of Art Dubai?
Between artist and collector, yeah, I think yes, there is, for better and worse. I think one of the amazing things about sort of being involved in this and collecting work is that you're really all using the same social forums. So everybody's on Twitter or everybody's in the Discord chat rooms, and you do get to engage in conversation and to discuss ideas with artists whose work that you admire or that you collect, and that's fantastic. I also think that the dream of total disintermediation is difficult for some artists. It leaves artists very exposed. It leaves them needing to play the roles of their own gallerist, of their own salesperson. And not all artists want to be doing that. And so they feel quite kind of confused or in need of guidance, and there isn't necessarily people there to help them with that. So whether it's a DAO in some way, we have a financial interest in the work that we collect and the artists whose work we collect, and we can help our artists think strategically about going to market with new works. or Gazelli as well, a sort of traditional gallery who are very practiced in those kinds of things. It does feel like a more close and intimate relationship, but I think that it's maybe a little bit too much sometimes.
India?
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting because in the traditional art world, you have strategically it's beneficial for you to have like an in-person relationship with your collector, to almost be like an advisor and to really cater to their needs. When we started dropping NFTs, correlating with our exhibitions in the kind of project space, we would just put the works online and we would send it to our initial collectors and institutions, but the works would sell completely online, and the collector was pretty anonymous, and the collector was more prone to reach out to the artist rather than the gallery. So in a way, I felt almost dissociate. I felt more involved with the artist than the collector, even though you're more on sales rather than artist liaison. So in some ways, I think there's a type of separation, but then you need to learn as a gallery, if we need to create a community on our own. So then going to be more kind of hot online and joining Discord and entering these communities with a willingness to learn and to kind of cater to the kind of collectors that are on Twitter and Discord and collect NFTs, as well as kind of digital art more broadly and things like that. So yeah, we've had to adapt and mold, and it's been quite fun.
Thank you. Paul, when I was reading another one of your pieces, and you talk about these three terms, which I was very intrigued by: smart NFT trader, smart NFT minter, and a smart NFT hodler. Who are they? What do they do?
Okay, so it comes back to the idea of identity based on behavior and the ability to reveal yourself. So maybe a bit like we're talking about that intimacy, how much do you want to reveal, and having the choice there. And when we track all the blockchain data and we look at the different types of buyers, because it's often anonymous, it's quite a nice way into communities to actually say, well, who is buying this? And we've got a series of labels mainly aimed at investors. And the first one, hodler, is someone that's held their collection. They bought early and they didn't just sell it. They might have seen massive losses on it, and perhaps you could speculate they believed in it a lot, or maybe they couldn't sell it. And but they still hold it. So now it might be worth an incredible amount compared to what they paid, and they're not selling it. So we like to know when they buy things, and we like to be certain that they're buying them. So. And when we group them together and say, as a group, what are the hodlers buying? It becomes a really interesting signal to look closer into. You can see the network cascading information in real time. The NFT trader is a much shorter time frame, which a certain part of the market is very well known for, and they're people that make profits within 60 days.
Flipping.
Yeah, they buy and sell something. It's actually quite a hard heuristic to put the assumptions around that. So we've done a depth of work on that. Our smart money team has done. I'm not responsible for it. And finally, the minter is very similar to the trader, so that's a short-term time frame. And the idea of minting is probably one of the most fun parts of crypto, and one of the most innovative bits that you can use in a whole different number of ways we're still finding out about. But these people specialize in the market there, so they specialize in getting early into a project and exiting for profit again. Although that sounds very financial driven, they're actually incredibly well-connected people who do a lot of research and still may, I think, value the art itself, but see themselves as a bit like a VC maybe. They make an early investment based on risk. They take reward, but it also helps signal that there's something interesting going on in this project that marks it as different, maybe an innovation, a very slight innovation, which outside of crypto can look very superficial, but inside it might just be a very small change to how things have been done before that pushes the space forward. So,
and I think Bright Moments are interested in relation to this, right? Because I think they take the minting process and turn it into a kind of experience, almost like a performance art, like a spectacular aspect of minting, no? Because otherwise minting is just could be just like clicking the button at the right time, no?
Yeah, I mean,
but it's interesting that they turn that into a form of social but also financial capital, it seems to me.
And if you ever do an in real life mint and you look at Nansen at the same time,
Yeah.
it's this brilliant dual world of people you can see online and people you can see in real life. And you can see their wallets loading up. You can see they've got 20, but you don't quite know who in the room it is, and then you might find them out privately. And it introduces a whole new social level.
Yeah. Amazing. I'm going to open it up to you guys in a minute, but my next question would be about when I spoke to Matt and Holly yesterday, we talked about legacy institutions, we talked about institutions to come. One way, one could make an analogy that something like Art Dubai is the equivalent of Web 2. And, and then what a DAO is in one of its pure forms is closer to like Web 3. And yet, here you are. Ghazali's obviously interesting because you're a kind of bridge, right, between a sort of traditional model and a new model. But I want to ask about, how do you feel regarding, the sort of expectations that you have from legacy institutions, whether it's an art fair or a museum or, I don't know, the Arts Council or any kind of public funding body. Is that something, do you want that? Do you expect that? Or do you feel that, I'm sort of wondering, will there be a Web3 MoMA in the future, right? That isn't housed at MoMA, that isn't Rhizome at New Museum, right? That isn't incubated in traditional things. What could that, would that be? And in order for that to happen, should one be actually quite aggressive about sort of saying, actually, in the way that, real Web3 acolytes would say, well, no, we really need to detach ourselves. Although in reality, doing that practically is very difficult, and I haven't really seen it. But how do you, and last question, what's your experience been so far in the last few days here with these lovely people interfacing within an art fair? Sam?
Yeah. I think that when designing new institutions or assessing the need for new institutions using Web3, I think we have to be sort of careful to parse things. Should we be building new institutions because the technologies of Web3 are, enable us to build more equitable kinds of institutions? Or are we building new institutions because NFTs or blockchain art represent some radical break in, art history or cultural history? For me, the latter doesn't make much sense. Mm-hmm. If you view the NFT as a medium of exchange, why should a change in the means of exchange mean that we need new institutions? If you view the NFT as the potential new medium, why should just a new medium of some kind, new digital tool, mean that we need new institutions? So I think that's often framed that way, and it doesn't make very much sense to me. It does make more sense if perhaps, you could design a museum in the form of a DAO. Mm-hmm. But it requires a lot of work, and I think DAOs are still in a place where they're not ready to take on that kind of responsibility at scale. I would say people are really still exploring with various kinds of governance, various kinds of structures, figuring out where centralization is necessary and where it's not in order for that to work. You do have organizations a bit like Fingerprints, really, that are sort of de facto playing that role at the moment, who are responsible for sort of generating conversation around work and saying this is significant or this isn't. But that would really be my view on the institutional front. Yeah. And I think it's important that we put this work. I think there's been enough damage done in abstracting digital art in the form of NFTs from a longer history of digital art to then go a step further and completely say that it's separate from a longer history of art, full stop, doesn't, again, make much sense. In terms of my personal interactions with people at Art Dubai, I've really had fantastic interactions. I can count on one hand the number of people who've come by our booth, listened to what we're presenting, listened to what we do, and have said, well, that sounds terrible. That sounds boring. I, as I say, have been really surprised by the numbers of people who are sort of Web3 literate as well, and the various sort of backgrounds that those people have come from. And I think that we're here because we believe that it's really important to interface with traditional organizations, traditional collectors. We're here really to have presence and to both try to educate people a little bit about the kinds of work that are possible and the kinds of artists that are making work, but also to learn a lot from people who really know how to create and sustain cultural value, because I think that's something that not enough people are doing successfully in Web3 at the moment.
Thank you. India?
I find the question about institutions really interesting because it's something that, like, I have been focusing on and kind of watching. I think NFTs, I can't really speak for DAOs so much. NFTs have been used as an opportunity for a few institutions to get extra funding to, for the collector to almost act as a patron for that institution by minting and dropping NFTs, based on the British Museum and, things like this. So I think it's more of it could be a financial opportunity. I don't really see institutional structures really ever changing that dramatically. Maybe in 100 years or something, we'll see how Web3 progresses. But it's been interesting watching the kind of ways they could see NFTs as a financial opportunity. In terms of the fair, I totally agree with Sam. It's been really fantastic, and it's been such a hybrid of people who, totally traditional, don't know anything about the space, and also people who, pull up the QR code and they buy our NFT on the spot, and it's great. There was a 6-year-old who bought an NFT with her dad, and she's got her own collection, which is great, really interesting. And people kind of, I don't know if it's Dubai or it's the art fair generally, or maybe it's the digital space, but people are so keen to learn about the technology. I guess I wasn't aware of how much interest there was and how people were so willing to, to get involved immediately, like there and then at the booth, and that's really, it's really nice.
Thank you. We're running out of time, but I will open up to the floor if there are any last questions. Mike, if you could wait for the microphone, please, and if you could stand up just so we can catch you on video. Thank you.
Hello. So what an amazing panel. Thank you so much. My question is for Fingerprints DAO, because recently we had the acquisition of Lava Labs by Yuga. So I was wondering what kind of repercussion do you see towards Fingerprints? Is there any, or what can you tell us about this? Because there's a lot of talk about decentralized Disney, and that's like something to be reckoned with, I guess.
Sure.
Thank you.
For those who aren't aware, Yuga Labs, who are the creators of a very popular NFT collectible series, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, now probably sort of the most known profile picture project in NFTs. It was just announced yesterday or the day before that they have basically acquired the IP for CryptoPunks and MeBits, which are 2 projects by Lava Labs. And they have done what many people have been asking for a long time, which is they've given full commercial rights to owners of those NFTs. So those NFTs can now monetize their assets and build brands around their CryptoPunks, etc. Significantly, though, they didn't buy the IP for Autoglyphs, which was a fine art project, was always intended to be a fine art project. And the sort of inspirations that I cited earlier, Sol LeWitt, Vera Molnar, etc., are influences that they were very explicit about. And obviously, rights and commercial rights are different in the fine art world to how they may be in, the world of collectibles or media franchises. So it doesn't really affect us very much. In owning Autoglyphs, we don't necessarily expect to have full commercial rights for what we own, nor would we expect that if we were to purchase a traditional artwork.
Thank you. One more. Right in the back far corner, if you could just wait for the mic, please.
Hello, excuse me. So I arrived a bit late to that talk. I don't know if you discussed this, but I was watching a video the other day about NFTs and that real image is hosted on the website. And the website could go down and you'd only own the link, not the actual image. So NFTs future actually through art, or is it through space, like digital spaces, digital 3D art, more like it, and yeah, that's just.
Sorry, is it a question about security?
No, not about security, but is it actually about art-only collections? Is it like a club, or, I mean, the digital apes, it's just a collection, it's just, it's repetitive.
Okay, so maybe it's a question about utility.
Utility,
Okay,
exactly.
yeah, beyond, I guess, tradition. I mean, there's a question of, traditional art, you could say, would have, a number of utility functions, of course, an aesthetic one. It might have a home decorating function. It'll have a financial function, investment function, and it may also have a social function, roughly speaking. But I'm not sure what the question is, sir.
I mean, it's not a question, it's just...
Okay, so if it's not a question, then we have to move on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. One more at the back here.
Hello. A question for Paul.
Yeah.
Is it possible to maybe label pattern than actual addresses on Nansen?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So.
Can you put the microphone closer to you? Yeah.
Okay. Like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay. I've used Nansen as a great platform. My question is it possible to label patterns of smart traders rather than wallets?
Yeah, it is. What we specialize in is not doxing people. So we specialize in anything that people have revealed that they're happy to reveal, or behavioral things. So we do that sometimes, but we wouldn't do it aggressively in any way.
Yeah, but my question is not to, because I see some of the wallets labeled as smart trader or a hodler.
Yeah.
But most of the time I see they're acting as a liquidity exit, Whenever I buy, it's already too late.
Right.
For the Nansen.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can blame Nansen on that, to be honest. But anyway.
We have our customer service and sales with us. But, it's a genuine problem in that we're not saying copy them.
Yeah.
We're saying this is an important signal to have a look at and give you all the different signals to make your own position on that, really. And our smart alerts will alert you in real time if you put it on the wallet.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have run out of time. Will you please give a warm round of applause to our guests, to Paul, Sam, and India. Thank you.